So the point of view tonight is dedicating our show to the journey of constitutional reform. In the 92 constitution's life, there have been, I'll call it 2.5 attempts to try and improve it. Around 2010-ish, President Mills set up the Constitution Review Commission with Professor Fiajo, working with Raymond Atuguba and some very bright people. They produced a 1,000-page document. Well, when President Mills died, it looked like that effort also died, because even though there was a Constitution Review Implementation Committee, nothing really came out of that. We still have the document, though. The President Akufo-Addo administration tried in their second term, 2023-24, to do some sort of Constitution review. It didn't really go far. We had the likes of Chairman Sabunsu leading that effort. One of President Mohammed's first things he did when he was voted into office in 2024 was to appoint a 9 or 8 member committee chaired by Professor Henry Kwesi Prempeh. They've produced a 127-page report hinged on many things they've done. Tonight we'll be looking at the content of that report. What are the key proposals for reform in that work? How different is their terms of reference from the 2 previous efforts? So H. Kwesi Prempeh is my guest and he's here in studio. Prof, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Bernard.
I've always said that you had a lot of hair until you took this job. It's almost all gone. And I know we'll blame the president for this. We also have Dr. Nimoy Thompson. First time I heard of him, he was described as an Africanomist. Mm-hmm. He's come a bit far.
That's
These
over
days,
20 years ago.
He's a special advisor to the president on a number of things, but critically, he's the chairperson of the NDPC, an organization he used to be DG of. He's a development economist. He's very concerned about development. We've brought him here to help us think through some of the developmental sides of this constitutional review effort, particularly because the theme is to move our democracy from electoral to developmental. Mm-hmm. Doc, it's good to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
We have Oliver Bakavomawo, very interesting guy, convener of Fix the Country, but also one of the leading minds at Democracy Hub. Interestingly, he worked under Raymond Atuguba, part of the young lawyers at the time, who wrote that copious 1,000-page report that has gathered dust, but hopefully will be revived by this work. He's here to speak to us on the process of constitution review and its complexity. Oliver, good to have you.
Happy to be here.
Wonderful. So the 127-page report is great. We have summarized about 55 key proposals. Very simplistic summary. So I'm going to run through them so we are on the same page. I know that our summary may not necessarily capture the full essence, but at least it's good for all of us to know. So we group the summaries under 5 main rubrics. So under the executive and the presidency, we notice about 9 key proposals. Number 1, maintain the 2-term limit for the president. 2, extend the presidential term from 4 to 5 years. Very controversial. 3, lower the minimum age for presidential candidates from 40 to 30. 4, subject presidential salaries and benefits to taxation. 5, limit post-office immunity and allow civil and criminal proceedings within defined periods. This is for presidents. 6, restrict the appointment of ministers from parliament. 7, cap the total number of ministers and require parliamentary justification for excess appointments. 8, mandate removal of a minister upon parliamentary censure. And 9, clarify presidential succession and post-election transition limits. So these are the brief highlights of the proposals under the executive. Under parliament and representative democracy, again, we summarize about 9. Cap the size of parliament at the current level. Don't forget, when we started, it was 200, 230, 275. It may become 500. So these guys want us to cap it. 2, study and consider proportional representation to improve inclusion. Strengthen internal parliamentary independence from party control. That's 3. Allow dual citizens by birth to contest parliamentary elections. 5, bar public officers from partisan politics without resignation and cooling off. 6, extend parliamentary terms to 5 years and align elections with presidential polls. And 7, guarantee public participation in lawmaking. There's also formalizing private members' bill, which the Okwe Parliament began, and required timelines for subsidiary legislation. Now, under political parties and elections, proposals include create an independent regulator for political parties and campaigns, control campaign spending and election periods, 3, mandate disclosure and audit of party finances. 4, establish a democracy fund for party development. 5, strengthen internal party democracy. Then we come to electoral commission and independent bodies. There are about 4 proposals there that we picked out. Reconstitute the EC to a leaner full-time structure. 2, introduce merit-based and transparent appointment process for the electoral commission chairpersons. 3, set fixed non-renewable terms for commissioners. Very interesting. And then 4, clarify removal procedures to protect independence. Now, under the National Development and Public Finance rubric, Nimoy Thompson, anchor national development planning constitutionally. 2, align budgets and legislation with the National Development Plan. 3, create an independent fiscal council. 4, introduce debt ceilings and fiscal discipline rules. 5, rationalize tax exemptions. And 6, strengthen oversight of state-owned enterprises to a constitutional body. There are more recommendations. Just pick out 5. There are more details in the full report. Let me do 2 more. Lands and natural resources. Clarify fiduciary management of public and stool lands. Protect reversionary rights of original landowners. Reversionary rights of original landowners. 3, ensure parliamentary ratification of national resource agreements. 4, increase revenue allocation to affected communities. 5, strengthen environmental protection, including recognition of ecocide risks. Then there's also a whole bunch of things under accountability and anti-corruption. Let me mention a few. Reform the Council of State to enhance independence and effectiveness. Take note, they didn't say scrap, they say reform. 2, strengthen judicial appointment, tenure and removal process. 3, limit administrative powers of the CJ. 4, establish a constitutional anti-corruption and ethics commission. And then there's also public service and governance, under which there are 4, reduce fragmentation of public services, protect public officers from political interference, introduce merit-based recruitment and fixed tenure for senior officials, and strengthen asset declaration and sanctions for unexplained wealth. Then there's a couple more on rights, inclusion, and social justice. Decentralization, let me do those 2. On rights, expand protection for women, children, persons with disability, and minorities. 2, abolish the death penalty. 3, recognize rights to food, housing, health, and privacy. 4, address discrimination against dual citizens and foreign spouses. Now, on local governance and decentralization, 4 recommendations we picked out. Create an independent devolution commission, so more commissions. Deepen political and fiscal decentralization. Review the election and tenure of metropolitan, municipal, and district chief executives. And 4, strengthen local revenue generation and accountability. Finally, on security and stability, create independent oversight for security services, clarify civilian control and deployment rules, and strengthen tenure protection for security leadership. Then there's also something called a living constitution. Introduce mechanisms for easier constitutional amendment through popular initiative. We'll comment on this later. And address something called constitutional rigidity and obsolete provisions. We'll deal with that. So now let's talk to my guests. Gentlemen, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So what is the difference between a committee and a commission that he worked for? Prof, I think that's a question I'll ask you, because today we heard the Minister of Education say that there will be no white paper. And people are like, why won't there be a white paper? I guess that's because of the difference you're about to explain, correct?
Actually, well, the Constitution actually says that committee and commission, the terms are used interchangeably.
Is it?
But I think the difference between ours and what I would call CRC1, which was a commission, was that we were not set up pursuant to a particular instrument.
Okay.
Right? The CRC1 was set up pursuant to an instrument, a CI, that created that kind of a commission. But I think that in the intervening period, remember that there was this lawsuit that was brought by Professor Asari post-CRC report during the CRC implementation stage. And that was to challenge the power of the president to proceed with the creation of this body. And the Supreme Court says, look, this is advisory work. This is preparatory work. The president is entitled to set up a committee of this kind to advise him on constitutional reform, and that to the extent that that's really the nature of the task, the president is free to do that. And so I think since then the idea is, I don't know the mind of the presidency, but I think that they thought, well, that also means that we can do this even without a CI or without a particular instrument. And so they proceeded, I think, on the authority of that Supreme Court case to just set us up this way. Does it have implications for whether you do a white paper or not? Probably. I don't know why. I don't know if that explains why there is no white paper. But typically the white paper has been associated with a commission or committee of inquiry that is established pursuant to a particular instrument, and then follows the procedures in the Constitution, the relevant chapter on commissions of inquiry, which sets out, the process when you submit your report, what it means, white paper and all of that. Because we were not set up pursuant to that process, I suppose that really obviates the need for a white paper, but I'm not too sure about
I'll
that.
come back to what the president can do with what you've done. Your terms of reference, I have 4 here. Review the reports and other inputs, and other outputs of CRC1 and CRC or CRIC, which is the Implementation Committee, and CRC2 or CRCC.
Yeah.
Identify and address gaps and challenges with the implementation of the work done by these previous aforementioned bodies. 3, engage the public and stakeholders to solicit their views and proposals for amendment. That's the meat. And then 4, make, quote, actionable recommendations for amendments to the Constitution that would enhance democratic governance and make for a more inclusive, effective, and forward-looking national governance framework. What is your understanding of actionable recommendation? Does that, in a sense, mean that something that he would have to agree to? I mean, what's your understanding of that term?
Actionable. I think it's recommendations with a roadmap, with a way forward that enables them to act on it. Don't give us something vague. Be very clear and specific. If it's prescriptive, fine, but give us a pathway of how we actually proceed to do this. I think part of what the problem that CRC1 had encountered, and maybe Oliver would speak to that as well, is that at some point, technically, processing the outputs of that commission became a problem, right? It's voluminous work, it's a lot of good work, but then there was a technical constraint in terms of processing it. And so that became a hitch. And part of what we thought our remit was, well, do the content stuff, all the substantive stuff, but also give us a way forward. How do we overcome this lingering problem of having gone through all of this and having come up with a bunch of ideas? How do we move it forward? How can we act on it? And so I think actionable both in terms of content, the substantive content, but also in terms of the process, the procedure. How do we take this from here into law and make it come into fruition? That's how I understood it.
Do you agree when Haruna Idrisu says there will be no white paper? Is he interpreting this well? And second point there, is it better that there will be no white paper?
So it's not a question of whether I agree with him. I think it's more that there's no constitutional requirement that there should be a white paper.
Good.
That the government can choose to react to the report. And in this case, they don't even need to call it a white paper. Because if you do call it a white paper, we have to question what the legal effect of it is. Because we know what the legal effect of a white paper based on the Constitution is. So it can be a government response to that. And that response can very well be said to have been delivered by the president when he then met them and said this is his views. He thought that some of them were revolutionary in his view. It's a government response to it. Maybe it's not itemized individually. But we should also not forget that the government can respond to this also through Parliament, right? So its representatives in the assembly can then decide to state government position. The party itself can also have a position in terms of this more holistically. So yes, there's no constitutional requirement for a white paper to be issued per se. I know that some people have also expressed the view that they actually want to hear government's view on this. I take a different position on it. I think that the government is better served by opening up the debates and opening up the different parties to be involved in the process. Remember that when it came to the CRC1, a lot of the criticism that attended the process was that the government had issued a white paper, which people felt that it took out the steam out of the entire report. So till this day, a lot of people still don't believe or trust Mahama on the process.
Yeah.
That, you were in the first instance, you issued this white paper that kind of cooled tempers. So perhaps politically, the better play here is to say, like, listen, let's just push this through the political process and see how people react to it.
And based on what you've seen the committee do and your experience from the previous, commission, are these more actionable? Because this is just 127 pages. You guys did 1,000 pages. I haven't still finished reading that. So, pragmatically, do you feel like this is more actionable because they're more concise? I was able to run through majority of them in less than 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So is it more concise? Is it more clinical?
I think that they are actually in the same position.
Okay.
Perhaps in terms of the load of what the CRC1 did, because remember, a lot of these recommendations are focused on the constitutional level only. CRC1 expanded its mandate to recommend statutory and administrative actions. Okay, all of those could have been actioned upon if you wanted to. And in fact, a lot of the recommendations that were made, the vast majority of them, were statutory and administrative, that we didn't even need to amend the constitution to do them. We just didn't act on them. But on the constitutional level, I think that it's not even the fact that what we have, it's, a more abridged version or more narrower, but it's that this committee has found the key to the problem that was in the first instance. And the problem was that the CRC1 had made a number of recommendations that touched the entrenched provisions of the Constitution. I think about 53 of them. Now, the question then that arose was whether or not we're going to put 53 questions to the Ghanaian voter to vote on. How do we do it? Do you have a long list that you come and write like a mock exam or WASI? Or whether or not we do individualized referendums? So that was a big problem. And I think what never really happened, even in terms of the implementation process, is that we didn't really have a lot of brain power to think through how do we solve that problem.
Okay.
And when it came to CRCC, they also focused on the content and still left that process question aside. So this is the first time that there's a solution proposed as the way to deal with that. And the solution that has been proposed with this is, starting with chapter 25 of the Constitution, which deals with how do you amend the Constitution. Now, the Constitutional Repair Committee is saying that to avoid that problem that we had in the first instance, let us first amend how we amend the Constitution. And to
Let's amend how we amend the Constitution.
Yes. So that the only question that is going to go to the Ghanaian voter is, do you agree with us to amend how we amend that part of the Constitution? So the bulk or the majority of the recommendations, or essentially 99% of them, are going to then go through Parliament and end in Parliament.
Okay.
And they don't all have to be repetitively sent to referendum.
Let me get you right.
Yeah.
If Kwesi Prempeh's committee says, let's make it easier to amend the Constitution, and we agree to that as a country through referendum, then whatever amendment we want to do can go through a parliamentary process without a referendum.
I don't necessarily think that they are making it easier to amend the Constitution. What they have done is that Ghanaian voters will retain the referendum option on a limited set of questions. Whether we should change the nature of our political system, for instance. Whether or not we have a presidential, the number of terms the president can serve, those they identify to be the core structure of what makes the Ghanaian democracy. Okay. But the vast majority of questions as to whether or not, at what age a person should be appointed, what age the person should retire, who can compose and sit in the Council of State, all those minutiae, let us then create a second tier, which is called a semi-entrenched. And we drop all of them that were previously entrenched that would have gone to the Ghanaian voter into that second column. And for that, when it goes to Parliament, you need 75% majority of Parliament to change it. But what was already 66, 2/3 majority of Parliament remains as it is. So that's where they have solved that question that everybody didn't know how to do it. In fact, before they were, I think the day after the committee was appointed, we had held the case for a new constitution, where we were saying that everybody is focused about the content, but the bigger challenge is how do we in fact do this? And our proposal was that we need to have a new constitution where you bundle up all these issues and present one constitution to the Ghanaian voter.
Wow.
So what you have proposed then is a workaround, in fact, of the technicality or the technical difficulty of how you put these questions to the
So
Ghanaian
in a
voter.
sense, Doc, this may be the most important recommendation of
I
all.
think it is. I think it's the least focused upon, but I think it's the most. It unblocks, in fact, some of the structural
Because
problems. We have.
failing to do that, all these discussions about, because I'm not even sure how you will present the question,
Yes.
what format it will be, whether it will be an individual election. It will be very complicated if you don't amend the process of amendment.
Absolutely.
So is he interpreting what you are doing correctly?
No, absolutely. He got it just spot on. I mean, and that for us was the real challenge.
Okay.
You know, because you do all of this work and then you hit this roadblock. And the truth of the matter is that at the founding, 1992, we over-entrenched, right? And we may have over-entrenched for good reason.
All right.
Right, because you do not want, usually you are worried about a transient majority or some regime coming opportunistically to just change things. So because of our own experience, we may have been a bit paranoid. And so we over-entrenched the Constitution. So entire chapters like the chapter on the executive, where Nimoy Thompson's commission resides, that whole chapter is entrenched. And yet when you go into that chapter, you ask yourself, wow,
Why on earth are you entrenching how
why
NDPC
must
should
we
work?
go to a referendum in order to change something about how the NDPC works, for example, or the composition of the National Security Council, or any one of these things? Then, so we said, look, let's really identify the key pillars of this democracy that we can consider sacrosanct or some sacred cows, and then isolate those ones and say, look, these are the only ones we want to keep as entrenched. Anybody who wants to touch these ones must go to a referendum. Beyond that, everything that is currently entrenched, as Oliver said, we put into a different category called the semi-entrenched category. But what we do is that we maintain the 75% threshold that it would have required to change it in a referendum. We just change the forum from a referendum to parliament. But the 75% threshold holds, which means you have to have a very high national consensus, cross-party participation to be able to touch it. So that's what we propose. And therefore, that means that in terms of the sequencing of the reforms, we go with this first and ask Ghanaians, look, this is what we've come up with. But in order to be able to process this, we need to ask you to agree that you would only keep X, A, B, C, D, E, F, G as the entrenched clauses. We will identify them, 2-term limits, you have a right to go to court, form political parties, multi-party, those features of our current system that we consider definitional of our democracy, we keep them entrenched.
Everything else will be semi-entrenched.
Well, there's already a category of non-entrenched at all, which means 2/3. We keep that at 2/3. But whatever else was previously referendum now steps down to a parliamentary vote, but 75%, so that it does. You don't degrade.
Okay, Doc, you and I didn't study law. What they are saying, does it make sense?
Pretty much, actually. But perhaps I should step back a little bit. When the CRIG was set up at the time, I was actually a commissioner. I was a commissioner at the time on the PV of Benin. And it's interesting to look back and reflect on the politics that actually went on behind the scenes in terms of the preparation of the white paper. We weren't directly involved, but we heard quite a bit, contentious and all that. And some point they had to, I won't mention their names.
It was so disappointing to read. After such hard work, somebody just sat somewhere and dismissed. I was like, this doesn't make any sense.
Right. And
we were there.
As commission, we also had issues with the white paper. So I have an old document where there's a matrix of the original recommendations, what the white paper had to say, and what we thought should be done. Where we thought the original recommendations, some of them were redundant and so forth and so on. So we went through that whole process. And I'm glad that at least we've learned from it with an old hand, Oliver being part of the original process. So he has all these insights. So I'm okay that we've actually come this far in terms of providing the space for us to be able to, especially the 3 categories that they listed. So the the non-entrenched, the semi-entrenched, and then the entrenched. I think it's
Makes
perfect.
sense.
Yeah,
So
what
once
I'm not clear about would be the criteria for setting which one would be semi-entrenched
Sure,
and that kind of
absolutely.
thing. But I'm
Did you
sure it's an
propose?
operational issue.
Did you make that criteria clear?
Yes, and I think we basically it's a very we defined it as, you know, what are these, what we considered from the committee's point of view, what are the core structural, you know, features upon which our democracy sits, right? So these are for us the foundational things, the pillars. If we say that we have a multi-party democracy, and that's what we have elected to practice, then the right to form political parties, the prohibition against one-party state, term limits, you know, access to
They
courts,
must be there.
the judicial
They should not be
independence,
touched.
absolutely. So those are sacrosanct, and we're saying that once we've preserved these ones, everything else that used to be entrenched, it was probably, you know, it didn't need to be there.
Like stuff like you can't prosecute the president after how many years?
There's a certain number of years.
Yeah, if you want to change the number of years, for
Yeah,
example.
that
right?
doesn't have to be entrenched.
Why do you
it
have
doesn't
to
threaten our
entrench that,
democracy.
right? If you want to change the election calendar,
It's not such a big issue.
why do you have to
yeah,
entrench?
So 75% of
procedural,
parliament
right?
can do this.
Yes, and 75%.
Change the composition of the NDPC.
Of the NDPC. In fact, that's a big issue, right? Especially if you are thinking that you want to reorient the constitution from electoral democracy to developmental democracy. And one of the key pillars of this would be, you know, national development planning, NDPC, and it's entrenched.
Doesn't
You go
make
there and say, will Ghanaians go to a referendum to change the composition of the NDPC?
They are looking for bread to eat. They don't even
Because
understand
there's also a minimum requirement for referendum. At least 40% of registered voters must participate. So to even get that threshold,
Yeah.
before those who participate must then vote by 75%,
All right.
it's not easy. So it's costly, it's technically very cumbersome and almost impossible to get in some cases. So it makes our constitution too rigid. And so we may, if we're not careful, if we don't get over this issue, we may really be stuck.
All right.
With this
But
constitution.
speaking of NDPC and the points that he just made, maybe it's just as well. Maybe we have to reflect more on that. Because with respect to NDPC in particular, and you've looked at some of the recommendations made here, which are completely at variance. Not all, some of them are quite relevant. But there are substantial parts that are completely at variance with how the commission actually functions, how it's structured, and so forth and so on. It's not something you want to be able to do so easily. So there needs to be some threshold that makes it rigorous to make sure that you are in fact proposing reforms that advance the process and the outputs of the commission and do not set them back. And some of the
We'll look
recommendations
closely
here,
at
yeah.
that when we come back. The point of view tonight is live with 3 guests. We're looking at the efforts to reform our constitution. We've concluded on one thing. HKP's work is a lot more concise than previous efforts, but it also tries to free us from the shackles of an unreformable constitution. Agree to change the process of amendment. That will make life easier. When we come back, we'll look at some of the key proposals for amendment and how they sit. Stay with us.
What does it take to be Ghana's most useful technology company? Is it the fact that we've been connecting businesses to their customers for over 20 years? Or that we power more than 12% of all electronic transactions in Ghana? Maybe it's that we are everywhere. From Accra to Kumasi to Tadi, Cape Coast to Tamale. Or is it that we safely process more transactions than any indigenous tech company here in Ghana? Or we deliver faster, we transfer safer, or we make businesses and life just a little easier? But what truly makes us Ghana's most useful technology company, it isn't the speed or the numbers. It's the people we connect, the dreams we keep moving, the communities we bring closer every single day. You prove every day what usefulness really looks like. We give you the tools, you provide the proof. Haptel, useful every day.
10 years of unforgettable memories breathtaking sights, unlimited excitement, new friendships. And this March, we're turning it all the way up. From the 1st to the 8th of March 2026, get ready for the road trip of a lifetime. 8 epic days, 14 regions, 1 legendary caravan. We roll from Greater Accra through the Eastern region, cruise into the Northern and Upper East regions, vibe through the Western region, and hit many more iconic destinations across Ghana. It's culture, it's adventure, it's pure discovery with the best people and the best vibes. Expect non-stop fun, endless scenic views, deep cultural immersion, new networks, and friendships and memories that will outlive the journey. Seats are limited, and this is the 10th anniversary. You cannot miss it. Watch out for details soon.
Welcome back. Tonight, the point of view is discussing the efforts at constitutional reform. H. Kwesi Prempeh is the chair of the committee set up by President Mahama to review the constitution. Dr. Nimoy Thompson is the chairperson of the NDPC. He's also a presidential advisor on SDGs. And Oliver Bakavomawo is with the Democracy Hub, but he worked under CRC1 with the likes of Raymond Atuguba, Nana Tewa, Otto Clement Takapam, and a whole bunch of lawyers. Now, let's talk about some of the proposals. Extend presidential term limit from 4 to 5 years. So, are these proposals what the people you interviewed said, or this is what you guys think?
Exactly, that's a good question.
It's all of that, right? So we're trying to weigh a number of considerations here, right? The interesting thing is that when we interviewed different sections of the Ghanaian public, including some of those who have operated the constitution at the highest level, former presidents and the like, incumbent presidents and the like. And of course, we also interviewed, we also spoke with, had engagements with everyday Ghanaians. And I think you could say that on this particular issue, the everyday Ghanaians' attitude probably is a bit different on this one from the
people who have served in office before.
Yeah, and so you then have to, when you get a split like this, right, then you have to basically weigh the issues. I mean, people are basically saying that they are frustrated and disappointed with politicians. They they don't want them to hang around for too long.
They want to give them 5 years.
Yeah, they don't want to hang. I mean, so you get that sentiment, right? But you also understand that, this is the place needs to be governed. I mean, people need space to govern. And what's in a number? Then you ask yourself, what is really about? What is this fetish about? 4 or 5, right? So you do a comparative, study, and you realize that the median, globally, most people are moving now, whether presidential or parliamentary, it's hovering around 5 point something. So you say, look, what's in a number? These guys are complaining that it's too tight a period for them. Part of it, and part of the response is, look, it's your own time management. Nobody says you must take X number of months to set up a government, and nobody says you must take the last month or last year of your tenure to go and campaign. So there is a time management problem here that is basically for the leader. So we have tried to free up some of that time with some of our proposals around campaign regulation, the campaign calendar, regulating the time for campaigns and all of that. But there is a real issue about just having the time to govern. In fact, a number of proposals wanted a single term, long single term.
Like 6 years.
Like 7 years.
Exactly. Ras Mubarak has 7.
Right? So some actually said 7 years. And we're saying, well, 7 years, this is a presidential system. In a parliamentary system, where votes of no confidence and other things can happen to terminate an unpopular government's tenure midstream, you can actually play with 7 years, right? Because if there is a rebellion in the cabinet or the party, they can remove the prime minister very easily or the president. A presidential system is not like that. The tenure is fixed. The term is fixed. If you said 7 years, single term, that's going to be a problem. So we got 7 years single term, we got 5 years, we got maintained at 4, and then somewhere in between 6 and all of that. And we looked around and said, look, generally the trend is towards 5. And we also thought
before you even explain, don't explain. Do you agree with this 4 to 5 year thing?
Definitely not.
Do you?
I have different views, which might require me to speak longer.
No, but I just
I don't
No, the
agree.
reason
on the
why I
same question
think-
of 4 to 5.
What I disagree with the committee is that I think that is one of the questions that should go to referendum. So it's one of the questions that they put into the semi-entrenched that goes to Parliament. And I think that this is a question that the people should speak on.
Whether they want 4 or 5 years.
Because what they have done is that they put
I think it's fair.
the 2-term and the referendum questions. So anything that concerns the modifications of the
It should be
length
together.
of the term should go.
So you
go
can't
together.
say put 2 term under referendum and then not
And
give
then
us
put
the
this
term.
one under
Length of the-
semi-entrenched.
Yes.
I think it's
so
a
that's
fair
what I would say. And again,
It's a fair
the concept and what they have provided us is the semi-entrenched, entrenched. These classes and what goes into the various chambers is something that can be negotiated through the political process.
Exactly.
That we can agree that, okay, this is an issue that has come up, This idea is not new. This is not the first time we have encountered it. And so you should go to the people. I would agree with that.
Why do you disagree with 4 to 5
No,
years?
but even before we get to that, to the issue, the options that he's offering, we need to look at the empirics, the empirical basis for doing these things. What can you do in the 5th year that you couldn't do the previous 4 years? I'm sure you're also familiar with the Parkinson's law, that work tends to expand to fill time. So if I were to give you a task and ask you to complete it in 1 hour, you will complete it in 1 hour. Yeah. And if I say you should complete it in 12 hours, you simply spread it out to do the same thing. Yeah. And there's so much you can do. And the commission is actually, as an example, just this morning we presented the coordinated program of economic and social development policies to the president. We completed it in 6 months. The previous one took 23 months. Now, following this logic, probably we should have asked for 36 months.
So you disagree?
This is something, no, completely. And from an economic point of view, it also doesn't make sense. You want to be efficient. I'm glad that they highlighted the directive principles of state policy, which to me is perhaps the central element of the whole report. But in it, it talks about productivity. Productivity is achieving the most with the least amount of inputs.
By the way, do you make the principles justiciable? Is that a recommendation?
But we have a different, it's not, for us, it's not really just a justiciability question, which is really the very legalistic way of looking at it. We are also saying that we have to look at these things as, politically implementable, right? In terms of implementation, you could impose a duty on a political kind of duty. Like, look, you're a president. Give us, in your annual State of the Union address, something that reports to us in a format that tells us what you've done in the last year to achieve this, that. We take it as our SDGs, and I'm happy that Nimoy is also there. So we're saying that let's look at this as our homegrown SDGs. And when we do a budget, let us, after we've done the budget, show in what ways
It aligns.
is the budget aligned to that. So there are political ways of, making this actionable, not just going to court and enforcing through judicial judgment.
All right, no problem.
That's one angle. That's only one angle. But I think there are more ways to do this.
For want of time, lower the minimum age president candidate from 40 to 30. Do you agree?
That I'm kind of ambivalent about. I haven't thought of because I'm not in that category that aspires to be. I'm long past that. But off the top of my head, no, it doesn't sound too appealing to me, the 30. Because it's one thing to be smart on book. You need emotional intelligence also. Not that age necessarily brings emotional intelligence. But at that point, you are between a man, a boy, a young man, and what would you, not an old man. There's a process of maturity there in leadership.
Really?
But there are those who have argued that, listen, we have people in their 20s now running multi-billion-dollar businesses and so forth. Yes. But these are businesses that can collapse and no one really feels anything.
But there are people in their 30s who run countries too.
No, but it's a different system. Those are parliamentary systems that start from the bottom. You start at the local level and you work your way, similar to what happened in New Zealand. I think she was 29 or so when she.
So you feel for a presidential system, the personal experience of the individual at the top is crucial, And age is a key factor in experience.
Yes, it depends on the political system. Again, as I said, in New Zealand and other places, they usually start at the bottom, at the ward level, and they work their way. So by the time they're in their mid-20s, in fact, they are well positioned to even lead their party and by extension, the country. We have a system that can easily lend itself to populism. You end up with the wrong person, such as what is going on.
You disagree?
I disagree.
Oliver,
yes.
what do you think?
No, I agree. In fact, we are campaigning for 18. Because there's no real justification in terms of the numbers in the constitution.
Yeah.
Parliament says 21. There's nothing that shows for it. So we had asked for 16 as voting age. And then remove age restrictions. In fact, that's what we said. That from 18, anybody.
Once
but
you
the real
vote,
test of it is, again, we have to remember that the Ghanaians must elect the individual.
Exactly.
That if an 18-year-old can go the length of breadth of this country and canvass votes to win the presidency, I think the Ghanaians deem the person qualified enough. That's
So they think the age thing. So once a person can vote, they should be able to.
Once the person can make a decision as to vote, the person can present themselves to be voted upon. And then they appear, I mean, we as citizens then ought to judge the person and say,
all right,
based on what.
Let me do a couple more. Limit the number or restrict the number of ministers from parliament. When you say restrict, what did you mean?
We don't say restrict the number.
Okay, then
We say
this is my
do
mind.
not actually appoint.
Okay,
ministers
so
from
yes,
parliament.
so if you're an MP, you can't be a minister.
Zero.
Oh, yeah.
Separation completely. You agree with that?
But this was the case before, right?
It's 79.
Yeah, 79
79,
was the case. Yeah.
Do you agree with this?
Yeah. It creates a lot of issues, challenges, and some of them were. There are even ministers. There was one case where the person was an MP, he was a pastor, and he was also a minister,
And board member.
possibly board member. And they were all overwhelmed by these things. But just to wrap up on this 4 or 5 year thing, for those of us who've been in government, we've come face to face with the enormous inefficiencies in government that, if tackled, can open up so many space for us to get to do so much. You won't believe what sometimes goes on where the people in various parts of the government, they even shake down finance officers in various MDAs that give me Christmas or else next year your budget, you suffer to get your budget allocations. And it happens. So you're sitting there as the president, you elect me, I will build 200 schools. At the end of your term, you've built 50.
Because
someone is holding back the monies. All because there are no systems of transparency and accountability. So the issue in public sector reforms is part of our work now. I believe that once we have an efficient system, there's so much we can do. And even the 4 years, don't forget, you are coming in on the back of someone's 4 years. If you discount that by, let's say, 2 years, you basically have 2 years already done for you, total of 6. But if you spend the whole time tearing down everything that your predecessor did, in addition to inefficiencies in government, it will take you forever. And to give you an example, take the competition law and the consumer protection law.
Gone through many
this is the 19th or 18th year.
Oh my God.
Seriously.
We are trying to get that. Yes, the commission is now pushing that. Now, what is it? 18. So someone is going to ask for another 10 years? Because there's simply no commitment, tenacity of purpose, vision. Yeah. We need to deal with all those issues before we even talk about those.
But you agree that no MP should be a minister?
Yes.
You agree with that?
I do.
Yeah.
Most people who listen to the show, I think when we discuss, they also agree with that.
Yeah.
And then cap the total number of ministers and require parliamentary justifications for excess. So because Mahama has 50, is it 56 or something? Mm-hmm. You think they should cap it?
Yes, I mean, we capped it in 79, under the 79 Constitution. We capped it even under 69. So we capped it before. And our numbers are a bit just...
Too many.
It just makes no sense.
So if this Mahama can work with below 60, that should be the standard.
We're saying that, the Constitution says cabinet must consist of 19 ministers plus the vice president, right? So some factor of 19. So we say, well, how about 19 times 3? There must be some reason why it says 19. Let's give you 3 of that number.
Then that's it. So
and then that's it. And we've just allowed a small opening to say, if you can justify to Parliament, however, that you need to appoint beyond one more person over that number,
then
for each additional minister, you have to go to Parliament and justify it separately from the
you agree with this?
Nomination.
Capping the ministers.
Yes, to a large extent, but we also should ask ourselves, to what end? Why are we capping it in the first place? There's this notion that if you cap it, you save costs. You save
it not
money.
true?
It doesn't necessarily follow that way. You can actually reduce the number of ministers from, let's say, 50 to 25, and your budget would actually explode just by virtue of the scope of activities and so forth and so on. So it doesn't always lead. So if we are capping it to save costs, we should bear that in mind. That it doesn't necessarily translate into
it's
that.
not necessarily to save costs. It's also to just unburden the president. Right? When you talk to a lot of, when we had meetings with the various people who have held this position at the highest level, it's clear that they are under tremendous pressure for patronage jobs, right? And as long as there is no limit, it's
There'll be
difficult
more
to
pressure.
tell the last person that I can't give you this job. So in a way, sometimes these
a hard
presidents
60,
are
so-
begging for their hands to be tied. So if a person came to you and said, "Look, I want a job," the president's like, "Look, I can't appoint you. I'm already 59.
Okay.
That's it." So sometimes we have to help our leaders to really say no
And Doc, don't forget that
to this kind of pressure.
maintain a minister is expensive.
It is
It's-
expensive.
So
yes.
whilst it's not, you can have other government appointees. I feel like it sends a signal that if you have just 59 ministers, and all the people who support them will also be fewer, right?
No, all I'm saying is that we need to strike a balance. If you move too far to the other extreme, you also have a burnout among ministers. Yes, and I've actually heard some complain that they're overwhelmed.
But you can
because they
change
have-
them. If they
say
are
that-
tired, give
No,
somebody
it's
other
not
work.
that they're tired. We're talking about systems that they work with. One minister, because they have maybe previously, let me use the example of Liberia, for instance. Not that it's the best, but I remember in Liberia, they have two deputy ministers. One is administrative, one is technical. That then gives the minister the time to perform the way they should.
Oh, okay.
We don't have that. And at this point, we have so many ministers with a single deputy minister. That then places a lot of pressure on the minister. So let's strike a
But
balance.
the Liberians have chief directors.
They do.
So what does the chief director do? Because if I have an administrative deputy
Exactly.
minister and I have
Why do you have
a
an
technical
administrative
chief director, minister, what else?
The chief directors, I forget the details, but there's a level below which you don't have policy influence. Ministers have policy influence, whether they are for technical, administrative, they can sit in certain meetings that the chief director cannot sit in. So there are those nuances that sometimes you bring to the table.
I suspect you agree with the capping.
I know, I
As
agree
for
with
you,
the cabinet.
Bode.
I do think that perhaps what has bloated it up a bit is also the question of the regional ministers. I'm not a big fan of it, but we have 16 to deal with, and they have to kind of accommodate that in some regard, but yes.
And also capping the size of parliament at 276.
Akotose even said 100. I don't know if you
I
remember that. The
I
late
think the constitution
Akotose.
says 140, I would have preferred 140, but
Yeah.
As a minimum.
there's a
But
minimum.
I don't think you have the courage to remove somebody's seat. So for now, keep it at 276.
Yeah.
Because
It
it will
was-
be a political suicide to say, we are coming to remove your hometown from it. It's going to cost you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So cap it.
So
Yes.
there's some pragmatism.
I mean, look,
Yeah.
the U.S. Congress hasn't expanded in size since 1911.
Wow.
Yeah. The
Wow.
population in 1911, I think, was around 90 million. It's now, in the vicinity
341.
of 300 and something.
There's something you said
And
which
it's kept the same number.
good. You said you were supposed to do actionable recommendations. You have a recommendation that says study and consider proportional representation to improve inclusion. I'm not sure you put it in the same way, but you didn't make a hard proposal for proportional representation.
No, I mean, because we weighed the issue. I mean, there is certainly, a consensus on the committee, or at least a majority in favor of the idea in principle. Now, to actually implement it in the Ghanaian context, we have been with first past the post since colonialism. Since the 1950s, Ghanaians are familiar with it. Our systems are all set up in that way now. And there are so many different variants of proportional representation on offer when you look at the options. And they tend also to be associated with parliamentary systems, right?
Yes.
So we said, look, we have a presidential system. There are some, Chile and I think Costa Rica, which are presidential, that have proportional representation. Let's study these things. There are so many different ways of slicing this cake. We, as a committee, given the time that we have, we cannot settle on any particular way of doing this. So we're saying it's worth studying. Almost every committee from SKD Asante Committee to CRC1 said the same thing. Please study this
Study
thing
it.
and let's make.
We don't have enough
Nobody has
information to
done it.
implement it.
Well, so it's just an admission.
Because it's a complete change of system.
It is, exactly.
So it's not the kind of thing you can just
you can just say,
You need more time to study.
We need more time. And especially as it works in presidential systems. Right?
We'll take a shortish break. When I come back, we have more. I'm going to get into the NDPC development plans and some of the proposals there. This is the point of view. We are live looking at the constitutional review efforts and the work that the committee just did. Stay with us.
Another payment through Stanbic. Smooth, as always.
Imagine making or collecting all payments without leaving your chair. Sounds like magic, right? Nah, it's Stanbic Pay.
Darling, can you please help with the bills, especially at your school fees?
From school fees to utilities, the government and statutory payments to investments, insurance payments, Hajj payments, and more.
Mommy, my fees has been paid.
Just log on to Stanbic Pay and you're set for life.
Please tell me everything has been paid.
No Stanbic account, no queues, no stress, no last-minute panic. Cherish your time and live happier in safety and convenience. Visit stanbicbank.com.gh or call to get started.
The Soweto Secondary Schools Resco Alumni Association invites all alumni to its annual all-year groups Thanksgiving and Remembrance Service. There will be remembrance of the departed PCs and also the launch of the 67th Speech and Prize Giving Day. The date, Sunday the 18th of January 2026. Time, it's 2 p.m. Venue, Cedar Mountain Assemblies of God Church, East Legon. Contact your year group president and register your attendance now. Semper Cum Optimus, always with the best.
We're still looking at constitutional review. My guests are Professor Kwesi Prempeh, Dr. Nimoy Thompson, Oliver Bakavomawo. Let me come now to what concerns economic development. We summarized the recommendations and development broadly. And when I come to NDPC, for example, anchor national development planning constitutionally. All right? I don't think I have a problem with that.
No.
Align budget and legislation with the national development plan. So, for example, it says to ensure meaningful mainstreaming of the national development plan into policy and lawmaking, the committee recommends that the constitution be amended as follows. Article 106 be amended to provide that every bill introduced in Parliament should be accompanied by a memorandum which A, indicates how the proposed legislation advances and is aligned with the national development plan and the directive principles of state policy. And B, where the bill materially departs from the national development plan, expressly identifies the nature of the departure and provides reasonable justification for this. Where the bill is inconsistent with or materially departs from the National Development Plan, the bill shall be referred to the National Development Planning Commission for comments on its coherence with the National Development Plan. And I see this runs through a lot.
Yes.
Article 179 should be amended to provide that all government appropriations, including the annual budget and the medium-term expenditure framework, should indicate how public funds are to be applied to advance and objectives, priorities, and targets set out in the National Development Plan. So basically, they are trying to elevate the National Development Plan. That should make you happy.
Very happy, but not just that. The fact that they've given the directive principles of state policy the prominence that we had always wanted it to have. I always said, even before they submitted their report, that if there's one thing in the Constitution that every Ghanaian must read, is the directive principles of state policy. I think it's such a close to perfect document. And so much so that we quoted, this is the cover of the 40-year National Development Plan, and Article 36.2, and I love that because it captures the essence of the work of the committees also. It says, the most secure democracy is the one that assures the basic necessities of life for its people as a fundamental duty. This is not known to the public. I think it's a kind of a creed that we need to live by. And when they started having military coups in the Sahel and so forth and so on, I thought this actually had to go international because they felt their democracies had let them down. And here we are saying that as its fundamental duty, it should lead to improvements in the living standards of the people. Now, we have the basis of long-term national. They do use the terms medium-term, long-term. Yeah. Usually you have the long-term, and out of that you have your medium-term, and then from the medium-term you have your annual plan with the budgets and so forth and so on. There are so many of those things that we are already doing, except that they're now giving us somewhat different perspectives. So for example, you cannot, as a ministry, MDA or an MMDA, take your budget to the Ministry of Finance or without first bringing your medium-term and annual action plan to NDPC for verification to ensure that it is in line with the government of the day's development priorities. That's the practice now. That was the rule, but it wasn't really enforced. But last year, we really started cracking the whip to the point where it actually created panic. And I even went a step further and said, listen, if you don't submit your plan for verification by NDPC, I'm not even going to release your third quarter releases. So it really made them to sit up. And so as I sit here, I actually have almost all the 38 MDAs, I think with the exception of 3. I have all their plans here on my phone. I have almost all the plans for the 261 district assemblies, with the exception of about 8 or so. And then the same thing with the RCCs. People often forget the existence of the RCCs, the Regional Coordinating Council. They're also required to prepare plans. All of them should go through NDPC for verification, certification, before the Minister of Finance would even grant you hearing for your budget.
So you agree completely with these? Something I find interesting though, Article 34 should be amended or to begin operational effect by requiring political parties and candidates no later than 6 months before a general election to prepare, publish, and submit to the NDPC a program or manifesto. So basically, manifestos must always submit to you.
No, those ones, I read those, and I have a bit of a problem with that. But those are operational details. Yeah. What we are actually doing now, without even the work of this commission, is preparing what we call the Policy and Legislative Almanac.
All right.
We've been working on it. This was since PV's time. But we thought we should develop that to guide political parties in the preparation of their manifestos. A lot of them tend to, but it's not compulsory, but it helps them to better understand the policy environment in which they prepare their manifestos. If you go through the manifestos, you see that some of them even make proposals for things that have already done by their own previous government that they weren't even aware of. So we have this policy and legislative almanac that's going to guide them, for them to know that this has already been done. And for me, I'm passionate because don't forget, at one point, I was the head of research for the CPP, and I had to lead a manifesto preparation. The frustrations of getting information to even do that showed at the time. And then I became Director General, where I then had to lead. People don't know this, but whenever an election ends and the government wins, the manifesto, which is a political party document, must then be translated into a national development document with a policy matrix and so forth to guide that. So I had that experience of that transition. And so I can empathize with the need for political parties. So we have a whole program, a different approach of dealing with both political parties and
so just summarize
also.
This point. You feel like the NDPC and the National Development Plan itself need to be given a more sort of elevated place because this is going to be development constitution.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ghanaians have been saying this. I mean, look, we want continuity. We want, plans must continue regardless of regime changes and transitions and the like. So we said, look, and we took a lead from some other countries that have done this quite successfully. Mongolia, for example, has an interesting model where, similar to what we're proposing, the national plan is passed. It is passed with cross-party support in Parliament to get buy-in from the different political players that are represented in Parliament. And once you get that buy-in, then it's easy then to say that, look, political parties, we have a national plan that is law, actually. So make sure that your proposals are aligned or what you're planning to do are within that framework. It doesn't dictate. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have look-alike political parties, everybody doing the same thing, right? The national plan is a huge thing with timelines and all of that, and you can pick which ones you prioritize within the certain framework. It's more, but some countries are moving in that direction, and it's helpful for their development. Some consistency, you see some progress. You don't go 2 years, then backslide and come back and do. So this kind of demand that the public always makes, and when things,
but both of you, the development plan and NDPC will only be elevated and important if its composition makes it independent and competent. So
what you mean composition? You mean composition of the commission?
So what I'm trying to say is that the assumption is that the NDPC and the document they produce is conk. Using Ghanaian, it's conk. Using Ghanaian English.
No.
So if you have
it's what?
It's conk. If you have an English, my point is that we are assuming that the NDPC's composition makes it independent and very technocratic.
There's a misconception, and let me use this opportunity to actually explain the structure and functions of the commission.
Don't see this as an attack on you.
No.
I'm making a general statement. I'm saying that we can only make the National Development Plan do what he wants if the National Development Planning Commission is fit for purpose and run by competent people. That's a general fact. That's not debatable. So I don't want you to debate. I don't want to comment on that.
No. I completely agree.
So I'm now coming to the point of there's a proposal to amend the composition or membership. So first, I want to understand why that amendment of Article 87.
Okay.
Then we can come to him. What's the? Let me read it quickly. Commission, for the purpose of viewers, the committee recommends that Article 87 of the Constitution be amended to provide that the membership of the NDPC includes, and they list about 10 things.
Yes.
Minister responsible for finance and economic planning, governor of BOG, government statistician, head of LUSPA, head of EPA, one academic or established professional with recognized expertise in economic planning, one academic or established professional with recognized expertise in social planning, 2 reps nominated by National House of Chiefs with knowledge in blah, blah, blah. 2 reps of organized labor, civil society.
Yeah.
The DG, who shall serve as executive secretary, and an engineer. And then the committee further recommends that appointment under paragraph F, G, H,
I don't know how they came up with
I
that.
shall be made in a manner that ensures professional competence, independence, and balance. What problem are you solving here?
Exactly. Thank you.
That's my
I think
challenge.
the problem we're solving is the problem you identified originally, which is if we're going to get the plan to do the job we want it to do, it must have buy-in across the political class. And then the process of coming to the plan itself, quite apart from the composition of the commission, right? The process by which the plan is developed must also be such that it has sufficient buy-in from the political class, from society generally, from industry, from just different facets of society. So really, I mean, just not focusing necessarily on the details, which really is not really the point of this. But the idea is that currently, as structured, every one government that comes doesn't feel that they can use the product
Of the previous
one if it's not the same party.
That is not true at all.
Right? So some parties come and they're like, well, but we were not we were not on the commission. So why must we feel bound by their product?
See the reason.
So you feel like the composition is one of the reasons why there's that type of...
It is part of it, but also I think more importantly, the process by which...
But what's the current composition?
The plan.
Do you have this type of people in the commission?
They have some of it.
Let me...
So look at the provision. I'm looking at...
no, I have it here.
3.6.
I put the recommendations of the commission in 3 categories. One is relevant, which is what they've gone, what you discussed, and we're perfectly happy with that. I'm sure there will be
what we just discussed in the past. That one you like.
In terms of, again, I couldn't be happier with the fact that they've given the director principles, which is
the pride of place that it deserves.
Pride of place. Thank you for that, Bro, for there. And then director principles of state policy is binding on all political parties
Correct.
at all times.
Yeah.
So
Love
it
that.
provides the basis. I have no problem with that. So I have that relevant. There are two categories though that I have,
problem with.
which is that it's redundant in some respects.
Okay.
For instance, we are told to work with assemblies and so forth and so
You're already
forth.
working
We
with them.
already do that and more.
Okay.
So that is and then the third one I think is regressive in some of the recommendations.
Okay.
The 3 R's.
I'm sorry?
Your 3 R's.
The three R's.
Relevant,
Relevant, redundant, regressive.
I like
No,
that.
redundant,
Wow.
relevant, redundant, and regressive.
I like that.
The relevant part, wholeheartedly
Which we
support.
just did.
Yes. Redundant is telling
These
us what we
assemblies,
should already do.
Which are already doing. Which ones are regressive?
The structure of the
What I just read.
commission, yes.
Yeah.
With all the, and I'm glad you went through all that. They are regressive in so many ways. They tie our hands actually. The existing structure is actually far more flexible and gives us more access to a lot more people. So for instance, I think, by the way, we don't have Minister of Finance and Economic Planning anymore. It's just Minister of Finance. And where the recommendation, I noticed that in some constitutions, the 86 is missing. So from 85, you go to 87. And people tend to miss that. So what they're actually referring to here is Article 86 and not 87, which is the structure of the commission. Yes, and how they go through all the way A to, I don't even understand why they have two representatives.
What is the current composition?
Now,
of
let me
86?
take you through that. So
I want
you
to know what problem they are solving.
It's similar, yes, exactly. I'm glad. So there shall be a national planning, the commission chairman, the commission chairman, minister responsible for finance or such of them, the government statistician, the governor of the Bank of Ghana, one representative from each region of Ghana. That was taken out. I don't know if it was an oversight or they deliberately did that, but you cannot do that.
So as we speak, there are 16.
There are 16 members,
regional
reps.
Regional reps.
And the document itself talks about all development is local. So I was somewhat.
But those regional reps are not. We don't have any qualification.
We write, as chairman, I wrote to the RCCs with criteria.
Correct.
And you'll be amazed.
So every region will give you one person.
Every region, strictly to the criteria. So we have people with masters in math, all sorts of things.
Is it sectoral or just academic? What kind of qualification do you need to be on a regional?
It has to fit within a broader development context. So we are not just looking at economic development. We are looking at social development, institutional governance, international. And we have five.
But I'm just trying to understand, they will not all be the same type of people.
No.
Wonderful. There's room for that, but
there's room for that. But after.
So it's missing here.
No, it's definitely missing that. So you have the governor of the Bank of Ghana, one representative each from the region, nominated by the regional coordination. And then here's the most flexible part that this one, the latest recommendation, it says, such other persons as may be appointed by the president, having regard to their knowledge and experience of the relevant areas and roles pertaining to development, economic, social, environmental, and spatial planning. This is very flexible.
Repeat that.
Okay, this is
such other person
as may be appointed by the president, having regard to their knowledge and experience of the relevant areas and roles pertaining to development, economic, social, environmental, and spatial planning. What this does is that, and the law also allows us to have what is known as the cross-sectoral planning groups. It opens up. So, for instance, here there's an engineer nominated by Association of Engineers. That massively restricts us. As I said, we just finished the coordinated program. Because of the existing structure, we could gain access to the experience of at least 3 engineers who are not necessarily commissioners, but they are Ghanaians whose expertise we could tap into during the preparation of the coordinated program. Once it was done, they thanked me for giving them the opportunity to serve Ghana. I thanked them, and they went their merry ways without being commissioners, because it also cost something. So we have these subcommittees.
So you feel like what already exists creates enough bandwidth to
it's far more flexible
than what they are proposing.
That's the part of
because they are bringing LUSPA, and I feel like LUSPA is nice.
No.
Or this doesn't exclude LUSPA.
Now again, it reflects a misunderstanding of how the governance system works. LUSPA exists on the ministry, so you cannot put it directly on the commission. If anything, it should be the ministry that's represented. That they also mention
Land Use and Special Planning Authority.
Yes.
When they are which ministry? Local government.
Not local government. Environment. Yeah, environment. There's also another one for head of environmental.
EPA. No, so I don't think LUSPA is under Ministry of Environment.
No, it is on the ministry, but we actually have LUSPA.
LUSPA will be under either lands or because it's land use.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yes.
It's not under Ministry of Environment. It's under Ministry of
No,
Lands.
but the
Lands and Natural Resources.
It can't be under Ministry of
No, the
Lands.
thing is that it's
it's
under
under some
ministry.
ministry,
Yes,
yeah.
it is an MDA. But the point
I
I'm
think
trying
it's
to
local
make here,
government, yes.
no, it cannot be. But let's just leave that detail aside
ahead, yeah.
and focus on the principle that you cannot put these MDAs on as commissioners when you have parent ministries there. So EPA, for instance, cannot on itself be represented
Why
on the
not?
commission because there's a higher report to a
But
minister.
what if the ministers are tired?
Well, no, it does happen. You have to nominate. Bernard.
And Doc, forgive me. Even if they are under a ministry, the ministries are very political.
But
if LUSPA is a technocratic institution,
it is a member now.
Hold on, and we think that LUSPA should be on NDPC. I understand your flexibility point, but I don't see why the fact that they're under a ministry should preclude them from being on the commission if they so would provide some. Because don't forget that LUSPA, one of our biggest problems is our lack of planning.
Yes.
So by land use, it's an authority.
It is an authority. LUSPA is actually part of the commission now, based on the existing structures. EPA, we work with them.
So it's an local government ministry.
Yes, but it is a member of the commission in terms of, don't forget, we have the commission, and then we have thematic committees that are open to just about anyone. We also have the cross-sectorial planning.
So they are not excluded from your work already?
Definitely not. But I'm saying that let's not restrict ourselves with these specificities. The specific ones are already done. And then VI, number 6, is the flexible part that allows, for instance, we're able to tap into the experience of 2 retired diplomats and a professor in international relations. They are not commissioners, but we value their input.
So when you bring this new approach, it limits
you severely. And then you ask yourself, an engineer, we have so many types of engineers. Is it a computer engineer? Is it a structural engineer? Is it a civil engineer?
Maybe a financial engineer.
But when we use existing system, and the law of Act 480, 479, actually allows the commission to invite non-members to its meetings. The same way the subcommittees can. So I like the flexibility. I like the existing system as it is now. Once you begin to list these specific things, engineer, then next thing you know, an architect also wants to be there. And then the surveyor wants to be there.
So you've made a great point. You haven't spoken for a while. So you think that the redundancy is in trying to restrict the commissioners?
Yes,
and taking away the existing flexibility. The existing flexibility.
I want to actually see that.
I think he considers that regressive, not redundant.
Yes, regressive.
But a critical point about continuity and change in government. It is not always the case. That's the popular perception. Don't forget that we had the 40-year National Development Plan, and that's what people often refer to. But under the NDs and MPP, they also attempted 3 different frameworks. Ghana Beyond Aid, Ghana at 100, and then the framework for 2057. None of them were implemented by the same government over 8 years. So the factors that impede the implementation of plans go beyond transitions. There are major institutional bottlenecks. So I want people to...
Yeah, but I feel like his argument, or at least my understanding of this, is that they feel like, you see, media commission is very effective because it's seen as, and something like PIAC as well, is not dominated by the executive, right? So they can choose who their chairperson is. So PIAC as well can choose who their chairperson is. A lot of times when an organization is dominated by executive or appointees from the executive, then when there's a new government, they feel like we have to change everybody. I think that's when we're trying to solve.
Let me offer the last explanation, then my brother Oliver will come in. NDPC exists on 2 tiers, political tier, and then the technical administrative tier. Right. Now, the political tier, the members are appointed by the president, similar to his ministers. When he leaves with them.
Good.
They are there for the duration of the president. The technical administrative tier is led by the Director General. They serve all governments. They are non-political.
But they are changed when governments also change.
Say that again? No, they are there.
The DG?
The Director General.
But when NDC left, you left?
I left because, let me say, I was politically tainted. People thought because...
I didn't keep
I could have stayed. And I need to make this clear.
Okay, the guy who was there when you took over, where is he now? As DG?
When I took over.
So the DG and the Akufo-Addo as
No, but
NDPC.
let me explain something.
It's not the
here.
same person.
No. Legally, I could have stayed on because I went through the process and I was interviewed by the Public Services Commission. So I could have stayed. And I voluntarily stayed until October 2017 to make sure that Nanado's program was actually in place. And I remember telling President Mahama that, Mr. President, I want to stay on and see you through Nanado's program. He said, do your best. So I stayed.
The person who was NDPC DG under Akufo-Addo too, is he still the person DG NDPC today?
No, he passed away.
No, Abraham, but he died before the election.
He died. I
So
don't remember
he died
exactly
before the
when.
election.
Yes. And then there was a technical advisor who acted for a while.
Yeah.
And then once there was a new
Government
change.
It's a new person.
Yes, but it doesn't. At some point.
So my point is that this distinction between technocratic and administrative may be in theory, but in practice it doesn't exist.
No.
The new government will change the
No,
person.
someone ought to appoint someone at some point.
That's the thing. So they are trying to solve it by saying that let's make it broad-based so that it's accepted.
But it still doesn't solve anything. At any point in time, a government must appoint people. The appointments
What about
are
the
two-tier.
10?
Okay, what
Say
do you
that
think?
again.
What about the 10?
So
Would you make it
let me take
coterminous?
Oliver's view on
Say
this.
that again.
Would
No,
you make the
the
coterminous?
Director General's position is not coterminous with anything.
I am happy you are defending this because you work there more than most people. So most of us will defer to you. But we also want to understand the reasoning behind the proposals. And we don't want to rubbish it on the basis that it's a lack of understanding. There is a strong perception around political taintedness of institutions, which sometimes these proposals try to address. So I feel like we need to admit that. I'm not saying I agree with them, but you need to see where they are coming from, what they are trying to solve. Oliver, what do you think?
So I think that to have a sense of the way in which this committee dealt with appointments generally, you need to look at the executive chapter that they drafted, where they try to provide some theory to rationalize how executive appointments are made, who are purely executive decisions, where there's a hybrid decision that requires a policymaker or a political decision, and where it is a completely technocratic. So they're trying to balance those when it comes to commissions like this and deal with that perception problem. Now, when you have technocratic committees, and one of the biggest difficulties is that a lot of the time the technocrats don't come out and speak to and justify it to the public. The politicians do. And when they do that, they own the process. So what they are suggesting here is that, okay, if we can re-engineer the composition in a way that people don't perceive it as executive dominated, then perhaps we can push this through. And then we can reduce that perception around it. But the point around the flexibility, I think that issue is already solved on so many levels. One, if you go to the Council of State, they can co-opt and bring in people to help with their work in the same way as you acknowledge in the Act. That it doesn't take away that provision in the Act that allows you to co-opt people to bring them, to help them form technical committees and work within that infrastructure. Now, one of the good things about a committee putting out these ideas is that we ought to be aligned on the why. Exactly. Once we align on the why, then in terms of the tweaking of who falls in there, it's something that again can be negotiated through the process of how we bring it
why you are
to
making
life.
a proposal,
Last point, decentralization and local governance. I think we had many, but we create an independent devolution commission, deepen political and fiscal decentralization, which is very broad. Review the election and tenure of MMDAs in 2 minutes. What do you mean by that? Are you saying we should vote for them on partisan basis? Did you make
We are proposing that we move towards election of MMDCs.
Okay.
However, we are saying that it should be done it should be phased in.
Okay.
It should be done incrementally.
Okay.
Currently, we have 261 districts. How we came by the number is important, right? So we don't think that those numbers necessarily reflect the many of these districts. We traveled around the country. Many of these districts are not viable. They didn't even pass their own statutory economic viability test, but they were created nonetheless, right? So we identified politics as a big part of the problem with our decentralization in terms of just the minting of districts. So we've parceled the states up, we've cut it up in into so many slices that really many of them are not viable as we speak. Politically, it's going to be difficult once you've given somebody a district to go and say you have lost it. But we're saying if we're going to move forward with devolution and with election, then we should use that moment to rationalize the numbers. What do we mean by that? I'm not very familiar with how the UK does it, but I have learned in the course of this process that even in the UK, it's not every city or town that gets to elect its mayor. That there is a process, there are certain criteria defined, and then when you meet that benchmark, then you can graduate into the status, and then you can elect your mayor like London or Bristol, or however you do it. We're saying that a devolution commission should be in place that will actually manage this process and roll out the implementation of the devolution plan, so that we can then say, okay, maybe cities or towns that meet this population threshold, maybe X percentage of the Ghanaian population, maybe this tax base,
they then can vote.
They then can begin to vote, because we're also saying that once you start to vote to elect your mayor, it's connected to certain fiscal decentralization arrangements. We think that we should begin to force our cities with viable local economies to actually raise taxes. They should be responsible for their own.
Pay for your own rubbish.
Yeah.
You don't need district assembly common fund.
No, you will probably need it, but for earmark, it's not for your recurrent expenditure.
Wonderful.
You should pay your salaries from your collection, right? Because unless and until we put in some of these kinds of rules and requirements, our district assemblies will just not collect. If you are sitting there and you are still relying on consolidated fund to pay you every month, when your collections in Accra are so low, I mean, look at all of this real estate boom in the last 20, 30
still
years.
Not enough revenue.
And you are still not generating enough revenue. You are generating.
Do you agree with this proposal?
No, I do, yes. I mean, I think the point where they try to tie it into the fiscal is also quite important. So they're saying that ultimately, for you to then become able to elect, you must meet certain fiscal benchmarks.
Correct.
That shows your ability to survive on your own. Then you then go to do this. And the evolution committee can even bring two districts together, where then they decide that, okay, perhaps if you guys came together, you'll be able to meet the benchmark they recommend to you. And then you feel like that. So I think that's a halfway measure to try to deal with an existing problem and also move us forward.
But just to clarify, I suppose my mouth was running so fast. I mixed up environmental APA with LUSPA, which is on the Ministry of Local Government.
Correct.
Yes, but not environmental
Ministry.
The EPA. But with respect to viable districts, I think this is an issue that's been around for a while. I think we created, 44, 45 new districts. And in some cases, without regard to the viability of the new ones. So in most districts, their main sources of economic activity is markets and sometimes the lorry park. And then they split it up, and then the market and the lorry park end up in one area, and then the other side becomes non-viable. But there are mechanisms for doing that, where the central government will make certain transfers to help bring about some level of equality. That's not always the case. The delays, I think now we have more timely disbursements of DACF. We've even done studies that found that even the macroeconomy affects the districts where inflation is so high, and they actually increase revenue collection, but somehow the inflation eats into it, and therefore they are not as viable.
I have a last question, and I need one quick answer. How optimistic are you that this effort will succeed? We've done CRC1, which didn't go far, and then we have CRCC, which was much shorter, less successful. Oliver, this is just a one.
I was very optimistic with CRC1, 100%, but that was the idealism of a young man. Now with age, I think that having unblocked this and having a president that is committed to the process, I think maybe about 80%.
80%?
Yeah.
What about you, Doc? That this is going to work?
I'll probably go 50-50, but let me squeeze in the issue of SOEs. I think it features prominently, but we didn't touch on that.
Yeah.
My additional recommendation would be that CEOs of SOEs have annual renewable contracts. So they may be appointed initially for 5 years, but it should be renewed every year.
Thank you.
That will force them to deliver.
Sure working.
Yes,
so
exactly.
50-50. I can't ask you to be a judge in your own court.
So you got 18.
Yeah, but I think it's a good report because it was easy to read through. Great job, and also with all the past work. So we're speaking to Professor H.Kwesi Prempeh, who chaired the Constitution Review Committee, Nimoy Thompson, Doc, who is the chairman of the NDPC and President's Advisor on SOEs. Sorry, SDGs. Maybe they should add that. And Oliver Bakaboma, who is what are you at Democracy Hub? Chairman or what?
No, I'm not a chairman. I'm a constitutional rights and policy strategy advisor. Chief man at the Democracy Hub. Really good talking to you.
An old boy from Akusi.
Thank you for watching the show. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.